I just like to chant the Bande Home prayers. I have sort of my own meter, so please don't, just chant quietly. Bande Ahang Shri Guru Shri Jutabata Kamalang Shri Gurun Vaishnavangscha Shri Rupang Sagrajatang Sahagana Rakanatanvitang Tang Sajivang Sadvaitang Savadhutang Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Mitangscha. He Krishna Karana Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesh Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Huripriye Bansha Kalpatarubhyashta Kripasindhubhya Vacha Patitanang Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Adi Gaur Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Presthaya Bhutale, Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane, Namaste Saraswate Devam, Gauravani Pracharane, Nirvishesha, Shunyavadi, Paschatya Desha Tarane. So, I'm going to start, I'm going to tell the history, the first 4 years, or actually probably 3 years, of the Los Angeles Temple. But I don't want to just tell anecdotes. I decided that I like these two themes. One theme is, the primary theme is empowerment. That Prabhupada, am I too close? That Prabhupada empowered his disciples to spread the Sankirtan movement. The other theme is strategy. For decades, the idea of strategy has been a favorite of mine. So I like to look at Prabhupada as a strategist. He was, of course, many things, but he was a strategist. So starting with empowerment, yesterday morning, those of us who were here saw Prabhupada on the screen giving a lecture, and in my mind, it was an empowerment lecture. He quoted Amara Gyai, that's a quote from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, on my order, Guru Haya, I can't pronounce that word, Guru Haya, become a guru, Tar Ei Desh, deliver this land. So, Prabhupada quoted that verse, and then he said, men and women, boys and girls, all of you become gurus. Now, of course, we learned that there are 3 types of gurus. There's the Vartma Pradarshik Guru, the Diksha Guru, Shiksha Guru. So, at minimum, everyone can become Vartma, means the path. Pradarshik means to light the path. So, at minimum, everyone can become a Vartma Pradarshik Guru. And in 1960, I joined the movement in '67 with all these devotees that I just adored. There was Hayagriva and Mukunda and Shamsundar and Malati and Janaki and Gurudas and Yamuna and Upendra, many others, that Dayananda, all these were just incredible people to me. So I loved the family. I loved Prabhupada. And so I wanted to do something. I was a little unsure. And Prabhupada was talking a lot about opening temples. In those days, the thing to do was open temples. I mean, you hear in Los Angeles, I'm sure, if you're a sort of a skilled person, you can communicate well. Why don't you go on book distribution? But in those days, the only thing that Prabhupada spoke about to anyone who was not too crazy was to open a temple. So I love this story that Rukmini tells. I heard her tell it at 26 2nd Avenue some 15 years ago, I guess. Rukmini was one of the first devotees to one of the early devotees to join in New York, and we saw her on the video also. Just what was that, this morning, I guess. So Rukmini tells a story about 26 2nd Avenue when they were sitting around. All the devotees were gathered around Prabhupada in Prabhupada's quarters in 26 2nd Avenue. Those who have had the good fortune to visit 26 2nd Avenue, you know that it's two buildings, the storefront, and then the back building. Prabhupada had his quarters on the second floor, and where the brahmacharis lived, and Prabhupada would stand in line to go to the bathroom and shower in the morning with all the brahmacharis. Can you imagine Prabhupada standing in line with, it would be like, you know, we're lining up for prasadam and Prabhupada standing there with, anyway, it's inconceivable to me. And Rukmini is sitting there with all the other devotees, and Prabhupada, and of course in those days not many devotees, Prabhupada says, I want all of you to open temples, speaking like that. It's private, you know, it's not in the lecture hall, but these are his disciples. And Rukmini raised her hand. Swami, even the girls? And Prabhupada thought, just a second. He said, yes, even the girls. So I love that story, because that was the mood in those days. And then fast forward, I'll tell another story that brings to mind. I hope I don't go beyond my calculated time here. Another story just comes to mind is Kaushalya, and I forget who else. It's somebody else. Kaushalya and somebody else. They're going on a train in India during the beginning of the India movement. I guess you could call it the India phase of Prabhupada's movement. It's in probably 1971. So this is after this question that Rukmini asked. So this will be another 3 years or 4 years on. And there was some discussion about having a festival, and I don't know which part of India, but they're on the train, and Prabhupada deputes 2 of his female disciples to get off the train and organize the festival. I mean, these are just young American girls, and what do they know about organizing a festival in India? So empowerment, this is my point, empowerment. Gorakhpur. Srimati and Kaushalya. Yeah, Srimati, she came down with Tamal and was drafted into the LA Army. So we'll learn about that. So Prabhupada asked everyone to open temples. So I was well aware of that in San Francisco. And then he asked, he had a heart attack and he came to San Francisco to Stinson Beach to recover. And he asked Ravinda Sarup, who was Bob Lefkowitz, not the Ravinda Sarup in Philadelphia, but Ravinda Sarup had joined Prabhupada's movement and was one of the trustees, actually, of the movement in New York. So he had come to San Francisco, and Prabhupada was going to India to recover from his heart attack. So Ravinda Sarup was all emotional and grabbed Prabhupada by his legs and was crying, "Oh, Prabhupada, you're leaving." And then Prabhupada asked him to open a temple in Los Angeles. So he didn't do it. And a month went by, a couple of months. I thought, that he's not doing it. Well, I was in San Francisco, but I'm from Los Angeles. So I consider myself just a junior devotee. I didn't know anything. I mean, these devotees were older. First of all, they joined like 8 months before me or something like that, they knew everything. And let's see, they were like 6 or 7 maybe. Some of them were even 10 years older than me. So I was younger in many ways. So some time went on, and Nandarani, my wife, and I decided to go to Los Angeles. I was a family man. Prabhupada had married me, and I thought, I have to get a job. I had trouble finding one in San Francisco, so we came to Los Angeles, and on the way we came with Uddhava, who just stayed a short time. But so we had this discussion. We're in the car, and Uddhava says, "Okay, Dayananda, you be the temple president, and I'll be the brahmachari." I said, "Me, the temple president?" I hadn't thought of that. I knew I was going to open the temple, but I didn't know. So I thought, "Oh, okay, I'll be the temple president." So Nandarani found this storefront on Pico Boulevard. The standard in those days was storefronts, because 22nd Avenue, New York was a storefront, then 518 Frederick Street was a storefront in San Francisco, and I don't know what number of temple. They opened a temple in Santa Fe, but I always thought that was a little strange to be the 3rd or 4th temple. And then Los Angeles was probably I don't know, it was before Boston. They went to Boston, Beacon Street or I don't know where they started. But anyway, the storefronts were the standard temples. So, yeah. So, so she found this place on Pico Boulevard. It's not really that good of a location. 5364 Pico Boulevard, somewhere near La Brea. And I found a very good job. I mean, I was a little surprised. I had a good fortune finding this job as a computer technician and making $530 before tax a month, which is about, in today's money, it's about $45,000, something like that. So, I think so, 40. So I gave, something I'm going to talk about a little later is the 50% principle. I'm really a 50% man because that's the way I was trained by Prabhupada, and I believe in my own philosophy that the 50% principle is the 5th regulative principle. I won't explain that. I don't know what's funny about that. But anyway, I won't explain it, but you can read the Bhagavatam and see what you think. So, where Parikshit encounters Kali, and there's the 4 regular principles, and then there's a discussion of what I would say is the 5th regular principle. So, but we'll get into that in a little while. So, I was giving $100 for the maintenance of the temple. The brahmachari, there was one brahmachari who was Aniruddha. I love Aniruddha. He unfortunately passed away some years ago, in Hawaii. Aniruddha Prabhupada loved Aniruddha, and I think we all loved him, huh, Gurudas? So, he was a brahmachari, so I gave him $100 for all his expenses and the temple expenses and however he managed. the temple, and then I paid the $100 rent. That the temple was $100 a month. Rent $200 out of the $530. And later, Prabhupada was, maybe a year later, something like that, Prabhupada was having trouble with his, some of the householders were having difficulty in their household life. And Prabhupada had been marrying his disciples, as we heard on the video. And but then he stopped marrying his disciples because it was a little problematic. You know, these householders were not very mature. So, so there was this discussion. I wasn't there, but there was a discussion that, you know, these householders are not giving 50% of their income, Prabhupada. And then some devotee who was, I don't know who it was, but some fan of mine said, "Oh, but Dayananda is giving 50%. And Prabhupada said, "No, he is not." Because if you notice, Prabhupada knew that I was making $530 a month and giving $200 a month. So about 40%, not 50. So, Prabhupada's first visit. Here's an empowerment story. Prabhupada's first visit to LA, we opened the temple in August of 67, and then Prabhupada came in January 67. He had returned from India. Did I say, yeah, 67? I mean 68. Yes, January would be hard. I mean, that's a real mystical thing, right? So he came in January 68 and stayed until about March of 68. I think that's what my notes say, yeah. And he came the first time to the temple. We had an apartment for him, and I think, if memory recalls, if it's this visit, I think it was this visit that Shamsun and Mukunda came down, and Murari, I think, and we all painted this. We rented this apartment. We painted it all white. We just painted the whole thing white everywhere, and kind of to purify it. So Prabhupada was staying there, and I was so nervous. I was just completely nervous about anything, closeness to Prabhupada. So I got in I had a new Volkswagen Bug, and anyway, so I had to have something for my job. So I drove Prabhupada to the temple. It was drizzling a bit, little rain, and I got to the temple and I realized, oh my God, I forgot to turn on the windshield wipers. I'd been driving like this the whole way. So we went in the temple, Prabhupada went in the temple, this small little storefront, and sat down. Prabhupada sat on his seat, and he said to me, turned to me, and he said, "So you will lecture?" And it sounded like a question. I said, "No, Srila Prabhupada, I thought you will lecture." And Prabhupada says, "No, you lecture." It sounded kind of like a statement, you know. "No, you lecture." And I thought, "But Prabhupada, I think you should lecture." And then he gave the command. So question, statement, command. "No, you lecture." And well, you're laughing. How do you think I felt? So I lectured, and then I had some crazy idea about nothing to do with the Bhagavad Gita or the philosophy or anything. So I had this crazy idea that you could prove the existence of God. So I went about, I don't know how I remember that, it's 50 years ago, but somehow I tried to go about proving the existence of God. So at some point, Prabhupada cut in because I'd said something 180 degrees out of sync with the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. And Prabhupada said, "Actually," and then he corrected me, he said, "Go on." Can you imagine? So there's an empowerment story. Okay, here's another related empowerment story. In 1974, those of you, a few of you I think went to India at that time, and Giriraj Swami tells this story about Malati, one of the sweetest stories in ISKCON history. So if you don't know that story, I apologize, but I can't tell it here right now, but it's the most beautiful story of Malati. We don't have time. We have to go to Prasadam. Okay, I will tell it. But then, but everybody knows it. So I'm just playing. So but before I tell it, I'll tell this other one. So, no, it's a good one. It's an empowerment story. This is the theme, empowerment. Just calm down, okay? So the story is that we went to Sridhar Maharaj's ashram across the Ganges, and so all of the devotees went, and of course Sridhar Maharaj was there, and maybe some of the other Prabhupada's godbrothers were there, so they all sat there, and there's all the Prabhupada's disciples sitting around. So there was, as we heard on the tape, the video, I don't know if it was this morning, it was this morning, there was an issue, and this is the Malati story also, there was an issue regarding female disciples, living in the ashrams and cooking for Prabhupada. So all the disciples are there. I assume the males were in front. I know I probably was. So Prabhupada says, Himavati, speak, give a talk or something. He indicated for her to say something about Krishna consciousness. So she was probably about, here's this gathering, and so she was probably about from here to there. So she at first, I think she was a little embarrassed, or she was unsure, and then she thought, Prabhupada has ordered, I have to do this. So she stood up and she gave a little brief lecture on Krishna consciousness. So this was 1974. She'd been a devotee for, 6 or 7 years, something like that. And she had to speak in front of not only all of her godbrothers and godsisters, but Prabhupada's godbrothers, sannyasis, these senior sannyasis, and Prabhupada. So Prabhupada was, as far as I understand, I never asked him, but as far as I understand, Prabhupada was demonstrating to his godbrothers that who his disciples were, that they weren't just, it wasn't just a fad or something, these people were just some hippies or something insignificant. These were serious people who knew, who understood, and who lived the Krishna consciousness philosophy, way of life. So there's another story of empowerment. Malati. Now I'm completely off. I don't have it down here. So the beautiful story, I'm going to try to summarize this story a little bit. And Giriraj Maharaj tells it best. But wasn't he speaking this morning, Giriraj Swami? He didn't tell us. So the story is that, anyway, this was the atmosphere that there was some concern. We understood, we'd heard the rumor, those of us who didn't know directly, understood that there was some criticism that Prabhupada had female attendants, and Govinda Dasi years before had served Prabhupada for a number of months, and so it was ordinary for Prabhupada to receive his meals cooked by a woman, and of course women were in the temples as brahmacharinis, and so Prabhupada was living in this grass, a typical Bengali grass hut, I guess you would call it, and Malati was serving Prabhupada. They were cooking his meals, and the way Giriraj Swami tells the story, as I recall, is that Malati had to go to and Malati had a small child, Saraswati, so she had to go to the treasurer to get money to buy the bhoga for Prabhupada's meal, his noon meal. And then the money is very tight, so she has to negotiate with the treasurer for the money. Then she had to go to a Saraswati, her baby, to Navadvip, across the river. So she negotiates with it's a tight money, so she has to negotiate with the boatmen to go across the river. She has to negotiate with the fruits and vegetable vendors and rice and everything. So then she has to come back again, negotiate with the boatman, carrying Saraswati back into and every day she's doing this because there's no vegetable garden or anything like this, not at that time. And so she's doing this every day. It's a very difficult task. Then, on top of that, she has to cook. Well, in India there's 4 classes of cooking. There's cow patties, then next class is coal, then next class is kerosene, and then the highest class is gas. So what do you think devotees were cooking on, fortunately, not the lowest class, but they got the coal stoves and maybe a little kerosene. So Prabhupada, so Malati was cooking on these stoves, very difficult. And I mean, for one of us who's not raised to know how to cook like this, and then she has to cook nice prasad for Prabhupada. We want to serve Prabhupada the best, just like we serve the deity. So every day she was having a little difficulty. Maybe one preparation is a little off or something. So Prabhupada then would tell her, this is cook it this way. And she was just having a really hard time with it and doing all this, and her child and all the devotees, of course, it was hard to live like that for all of us who have grown up in the lap of luxury here in this country, to go to a rural area of India. It's not like it was Delhi or even Calcutta. It was in the rural area of West Bengal. So finally she thought that she had done a good job on she was really ready to give up and ask Prabhupada to change services. But finally she thought, okay, I've done this now. I think I've got it. And she went to Prabhupada and gave him his plate. And by the way, it was just this one room, a grass hut, and thatch roof. And anybody I don't know if you're familiar with the Bengal architecture, but that's typical. And then there was a separation, like a cloth separation, and that was the kitchen. She was just sitting on the floor, cooking on her stoves, and then Prabhupada was right there, and then in the next room on the other side of the cloth. So she took the plate in, gave it to Prabhupada. Prabhupada ate it, and he said, "Too much salt, but not in the prasadam. It was too much salt on the side of the plate, along with the lemon and the other, whatever you call those things that you can optionally put on the prasad. Too much salt because of wastage." Prabhupada didn't like for wastage, because too much salt, because then you have to throw it away. So Malati was beside herself. She was thinking, I'm really carrying this out too long. This is the way, I'm just trying to do it the way Maharaj Anyway, so she thought, I can't do this. I just want to please Prabhupada, but I'm not pleasing him. It's not. And I know Malati. She'll do anything. And right from the beginning, from day one, she was serving in San Francisco. She organized the Prasadam program. I know her. So responsible. So dedicated. So it wasn't a question of, oh, I can't do this. No. She thought that she wasn't pleasing Prabhupada. So then word came that Prabhupada was going to entertain his godbrothers. Are you sure you don't know this story? Everyone knows this, right? Yeah, you know, you've heard it. All right, so I'll go on to the next. So, Prabhupada, such a sweet story, wow. So Prabhupada had invited his godbrothers to come, and of course this story in time, it takes, I believe it was before we went to Sri Ramaraj's with everyone. But so Prabhupada's godbrothers came over, were going to come over, and from Navadvip to Mayapur, and Malati got word of that, and she thought, oh well, I'm not going to cook now because the godbrothers are coming, and but I'll tell him that, I'll ask him for another service or something like that when it's convenient. So then Prabhupada said, my godbrothers are cooking, and I want you to cook this and this. So then she was so surprised that Prabhupada asked her to cook for his godbrothers, and so then she thought to herself, well, I'll do this, and then tomorrow I'll speak to Prabhupada about this, or later in the day. So she cooked the meal, and as I understand the way Giraj Swami tells the story, that she's got her head covered, and she's practically crawling in the room, and delivers the plate to Prabhupada. And I don't know if I can say this. And Prabhupada says to Malati, he says to his godbrothers, yes, this is she's cooking for me, and she would cut her throat for me, and I would cut my throat for her. I'm sorry, can you say that the way you... Okay. Good, yes. That's the way I remember it. So... I can't really comment on that. If somebody doesn't understand, then it can't be explained, I guess. So I've already gone way over time. I've forgotten now. It's 12:30 to 1:15. I have like 10 minutes left. Okay, let's, Prabhupada asked me to speak, and that's it. It's on the first page. Okay, moving forward to, so that's Pico Boulevard. Prabhupada came for a few months, and after my embarrassing lecture there, he gave regular talks, of course. Never asked me again for for a while anyway. Until he, anyway, so then Prabhupada left and went traveling, and Aniruddha and I, the year's lease was up, so we're fast forwarding a year. It's now August 1968. We started there in 67, so August 1968 came around, and Aniruddha said, well, I don't know, we sort of shared this talk. What shall we do now? Shall we extend the lease? So it came down, what we decided was that, shall we extend the lease? Somehow I had a little extra money, you know, all that money, because I only gave 40%. So I was saving extra, I had all this extra money. And so I had extra money, and shall we buy a nice rug for the temple, or shall we move to a better location? So we thought, okay, let's move to a better location. Isn't that very good? So somehow Aniruddha found this place on Hollywood Boulevard. And everyone who's, I assume, here from LA, this is like 1 block west of Grauman's Chinese Theater. Isn't that right? Yeah, we went to see it yesterday. And it was a beauty parlor. And somehow we got it. But the big mistake was that we signed a month-to-month lease. I mean, I want to blame it on Aniruddha, but Prabhupada told me that the buck stops here. I was the temple president, so I'm sure it wasn't him anyway. So anyway, a month-to-month lease, and we moved in, and we started cooking there, and already the traveling Sankirtan party had come down and visited late in the year before we moved to Hollywood Boulevard. Now the traveling Sankirtan party, there were 2 traveling Sankirtan parties that were kind of competing. One was on the East Coast, and one was on the West Coast from San Francisco. It was Tamal Krishna Maharaj. Now all these names that I'm going to list off, these became top leaders in ISKCON later. Some of them didn't continue on until today, but they became instrumental in the formation of ISKCON. There's Tamal Krishna Maharaj, Vishnu Jan Maharaj, well, I'm saying Maharaj, but Tamal Krishna Vishnu Jan, Dayananda, Ribhadananda, Sudama, there was Shilavati, Srimati, there was, I'm sure I'm missing, Madhavisa, and Jayananda. I'll say his name twice. So, so they all came down to visit, and they had come to visit previously, and now they came down to the Hollywood Boulevard Temple, this fantastic space. It was fairly big, and as you can imagine, a kind of a typical beauty parlor kind of arrangement. And there was a toilet in the back, and I'm kind of handy with things, so I went down in the basement and I wired water and gas and everything I found in the basement. I put pipes everywhere and stole gas and water and put it into the temple to make for prasadam and for showers and stuff, because we couldn't afford another. We had to live there as well. So, and we had the Jagannath deities that Shamsundar had carved. So those were the deities we had, just Jagannath, Subhadra, and Balaram. And then Prabhupada came, and I can't remember, I think he came before, just before we got kicked out or just after. And we were literally on the street. So the fact is that they gave me an incentive. They said, look, there's no way you can fight this. You have to get out. We were cooking, and chants was going. I mean, this is a multi-story building. So I don't know, like 8, 10, 12 stories or something like that. so all the chants was going, and I think there must have been offices. I never went up there, but I assume, you know, all the office workers are up there. And what is this chants, you know, and what is this, all these weird spices and incense and all this thing. So that was probably the, you know, a big reason, main reason. And then, you know, we were just, Aniruddha and I just weren't dressed in dhotis. You know, I had my job, so I just had like my sport coat and tie and that kind of thing. So we rented it without them being exposed to the full-on devotee experience. So we got kicked out, and the incentive was that, all right, we'll refund your deposit or something like that if you get out on time. So I thought, well, you know, I'm just going to have to go with the money, you know, I mean, and if we have to move everything out, we would have to do that anyway. I mean, it would take us time to figure out where to go, so we just might as well bite the bullet and get out. So the brahmacharis were there, and they found a place. They'd met somebody on Sankirtan. They were going out every day, this world traveling Sankirtan party. I mean, they were genuinely looking to travel around the world, and so expertly managed by Tamal Krishna Maharaj. I just, in the sort of the history of ISKCON, he's been a controversial figure, but never controversial to me. I always adored Tamal Krishna Maharaj as many devotees, as I adored many devotees who are more talented and charismatic and had more wonderful qualities that I aspired to. So they went on Sankirtan, they met somebody, so they found places to stay. Some were okay and some were not so desirable. But then Prabhupada came and we rented a place on Hayward, and he stayed there for a number of months in this street, Hayward, near Montrose, south of Hollywood Boulevard. And so we moved the Jagannath deities to Prabhupada's apartment, and Nandarani and I stayed, we found a little apartment, and all the brahmacharinis stayed there, and then there were a couple of straggler devotees, male devotees, and we would all eat prasadam there at my house, and then and then I would go to work every day, and they would cook prasadam, and then I would come home and Nandarani saved a plate, and once a devotee tried to take my plate, you know, so Nandarani pulled a knife on him. So. I had to throw that. It has nothing to do with Prabhupada. So, what? Butter knife? No, that wasn't the devotee's name. So Prabhupada was there, and he was giving lectures. Tamal and the brahmacharis were arranging places to give lectures. I remember one time we gave a lecture in a garage, somebody's garage. Somebody said we could have this garage, and then time was just flying by. It's hard for me to remember every single incident, but one time I think the brahmacharis had gotten settled, and they finally found an apartment that somebody would actually rent to this group of men with shaved heads and orange clothes. And so we had this program. Prabhupada came, and they all had fresh dhotis. Now in those days we didn't have Indian dhotis. They got polyester saffron cloth, so it was like this kind of slick. I mean, it looked really great, and all the brahmacharis had these dhotis, and they all had freshly shaved heads. So, and there's a tape of this actually, of this lecture. So Prabhupada sat down, and then Dayananda came in the back, and Prabhupada says, "Oh, Dayananda, he looks just like Lord Chaitanya." And I remember Dayananda turned 4 shades of red. So Prabhupada would go on his morning walk, and he would look for lease signs, and then he would give them to me, and I would go around. So meanwhile, I'm working every day, and so it was difficult to look for a temple and to feel utterly devastated that I precipitated this. And so finally, I can't remember exactly how it happened, but we stumbled on this realtor, Leo Brown. So Leo Brown found this temple for us, or this church it was, on La Cienega Boulevard, 1975 La Cienega Boulevard, just a bit north of Venice. And so Prabhupada and I went, I don't recall, no, just Prabhupada and I went to the to see the temple, and of course Leo Brown. And we walked all through the little place. It was just this wood construction, small church, and it had, of course, the church part, where the congregation would go. No pews or anything, just empty, with the little stage where we put the deities, and then behind that was a room we used for prasadam. Not very big, actually. I mean, considering it was quite a small little church. And then so temple room, prasadam room. There was one room off that became the brahmacharini quarters, kitchen in the back, the brahmachari quarters, and then there were 2 bathrooms with showers. And the showers were non-functional at the time. They were capped off or something. So Prabhupada said, "Can we make these into showers?" And you can imagine that I just caused this fiasco. I was so reluctant to be positive. I was sure we could make them into showers. And I said, "I think so, Prabhupada." So there was, I was having such trouble committing at that point. So we did. We'd made showers there, and then the brahmacharis would sleep in this one room with the 2 showers off of that room. So then the brahmacharis would get up and they would take their showers, and then they would clear out of the brahmachari room, put everything, all their sleeping bags and all their accoutrements into one sort of storage room. They would go into the temple room, and then all the brahmacharinis would come through the brahmachari quarters to take a shower in the adjacent bathroom. So this is the way we managed. But before that, before the brahmacharis actually committed to move in, Nandarani and I lived there with all the brahmacharinis, and I was just basically going crazy because if you remember, the Pico temple had a $100 rent. Well, this place had a $400 rent. Now, I think the index is 7, so multiply that by 7, right? But 4 times 7 is what? $2,800. So, I'm just this young guy with this decent job, but it was hard for me to come up with this $400, which would be like $2,800 today. So I went to Prabhupada and said, "I just can't, do this." And my daughter had staph infection on her knee, and it was just so very difficult. So Prabhupada said asked the brahmacharis to move into the temple and become the Los Angeles temple. So we nationalized the traveling Sankirtan party. So this, in my opinion, my inept sort of action in Hollywood Boulevard is the reason that we have this glorious temple, you know. So I justify my mistake by the fact that all these wonderful, brilliant, dedicated, responsible devotees moved in. Shilavati became the main pujari practically for the world. Tamal Krishna Maharaj became instrumental in so many temples and book distribution, Maharati, and Vishnu Jan was just like the most incredibly attractive person. I mean, you couldn't stand in front of him. You were just like drawn to him. And Madhavisa, San Francisco, GBC of Australia, and just all of these incredible people became the core of the Los Angeles temple, almost by accident, by Krishna and Prabhupada's arrangement. And Prabhupada really liked Los Angeles, so. Okay. 1 minute. So then, strategy. So in La Cienega, two things. So two stories in La Cienega. Strategy. We were driving down the street. I was driving Prabhupada down the street, and Prabhupada saw this billboard sign, and it's something like it was for a car, a new automobile. It said, "Match this, all other," like whatever it was, like, "Match this, all other brands," or something. I can't remember exactly. So Prabhupada said, Put a billboard like that in front of the temple that says, "Match this, all other religions." But that always said something to me. I mean, why do I remember that after 50 years? Prabhupada was very competitive with, I mean, it's not just let's slide our philosophy into Western culture. I mean, you see Yodabar's t-shirt on the back, it says spiritual revolution. So Prabhupada, in my mind, was very much a revolutionary. One of the things that attracted me to Krishna consciousness was that Tadvag Visargo, that the way to bring about a spiritual revolution in society, the verse in the Bhagavatam. I read that in San Francisco when I was there. So I had joined a revolution. So when I heard Rameshwar give a lecture here some years later, and he said, "We're distributing books in Chicago, in the Chicago airport, and they're like bombs." I thought, yeah, it's the revolution. So that kind of rhetoric was very appealing to me. And when Prabhupada said, "Match this, all you religions," I just have remembered that all these years. Yeah. Match this. This is, we're out there to compete in the world, and this is our culture, this is our philosophy, and we're competitive with any of that. We're competitive with all the religions, and not only that, later on, Prabhupada said, well, we're competitive with science also, the scientific establishment. That we can compete with as well. So these are the strategies, some of the strategies that impressed me. So another strategy, Prabhupada in La Cienega introduced this monthly festival, the idea of a monthly festival, and Vishnu Jan would make puppets, and we would have the Prahlad story puppet show, and we would have the. So what are we doing? I'll go up to 1:30 then.
We have prasadam at 1:30, so we want to listen to you for another 2.5 minutes, and we want to make sure that you come back and share a lot more. So there's more in the store. So
okay, so give me 2.5 minutes then. So so the strategy is that we're doing these monthly festivals.
10 minutes late.
Under my watch, everything works according to the clock. So.
Okay, no, I'm not going to take a vote because I want the 2 minutes. Okay, please. So. All right, so this is a strategy, but this is the Bhagavatam philosophy. I mean, this is the Bhagavat philosophy that we have these Bhagavat festivals. So every month, Prabhupada wanted a Bhagavat festival. You know, there's a Prahlad story, puppet show. We had butter churning, and so we were churning the butter in the temple, and all these different sort of Bhagavat manufactured festivals. Okay, so fast forward to Vatseka. This is one. Can I borrow your watch for a second? So there's this. The way we found the temple here is what? Is that Leo Brown, Prabhupada suggested that it's kind of a long story, but just to make it brief, we're meeting Leo Brown, Gargamuni and I, and Prabhupada are meeting Leo Brown. Here in this walkway here, right outside, there's a door that's sealed shut. It's a black door, used to be just a regular door. So the minister happened to be inside. Prabhupada took his cane and he knocked on the wall. He said, "What is this construction?" You know, the stucco wall. And then the minister opened the door and he invited us in. We're waiting for Leo Brown, the realtor who had found us the place at Dayananda. And Prabhupada started to explain to the minister the philosophy of Krishna consciousness in this really cogent way, just very sweetly and concisely. And speaking to the ministers, Leo Brown came, we toured the place. There was the Methodists were combining their congregation, and they wanted to sell one of their churches. So we went to the other church, and this one, of course, and we decided this one was the best. We went across the street, and Prabhupada starts to tell the minister that, well, you know, we're poor as church mice. He says that, poor as church mice. And then he says, you know, you are servants of God, we are servants of God, so you should give it to us. But, of course, that's not practical. But he said that. He said, you know, we can share this. And then he said to the minister, so he's talking to the minister, and the minister says, well, you know, it's not up to me, we have a board of trustees. So Prabhupada said, good, you represent us with the board of trustees. So I know I'm going over time, but I have to tell the other story about the minister, and then one last, so two more. The one about the minister is that, so this is just Gargamuni, Prabhupada, and I, and all the devotees, Prabhupada wanted all the devotees to see the temple. So all or at least half of the devotees come over. So everyone will be inspired. You know, this is a new place. We're not keeping the devotees in the dark. We're going to do this all together. So all the devotees come over. We're walking around, we're doing a tour. Somehow we had access, independent of the minister. Now we're definitely going to purchase the place. We go in, we go around the temple, inside, here and there, and then all of a sudden we come upon the minister. The minister's coming up, and he comments on the disciples. Oh, these are such nice young people, you're students. And then Prabhupada said, yes, you can become also. Prabhupada didn't miss a beat. Final story. So this is strategy. So Prabhupada, was delighted that we had moved into, obviously, into this wonderful, wonderful building, and it became then the world headquarters because of it's just a marvelous place. And then he loved the fact that, and Jayapataka talks about this also, excuse me, he loved the fact that it was in this residential area, and in my way of thinking, he perceived this as a way to convince the average American. These are, in this neighborhood, again, it's in my way of understanding, that this is the neighborhood of the American people. So we should convert these people. And so he wanted us to take a procession around the deity, a procession with the deity, small Radha and Krishna, Rukmini Dwarkadish. And so we built a cart and we took them around. But we made some mistakes. We went too early on Sunday mornings, and then we had this practice that we were gradually trying to reform ourselves of, that was stealing flowers. So that's almost the end. The end of the story is that, of this story, is that these were strategies that we may not have executed them well, but I believe so solidly that Krishna, because I came from the family era of Krishna consciousness. There were no sannyasis. I came from the family era, and we were all empowered to preach Krishna consciousness. And I am so much of the opinion that this is a family movement. How many of us can be sannyasis? This is a family movement, and the families should feel themselves empowered. Men, women, Prabhupada said on the tape, boys and girls, we should be empowered. This is what the way I understand things can go. And everyone can be a preacher and a guru, and Prabhupada had the vision to convert the American people, the American culture. We don't need to do it perhaps in any particular way. Whatever strategy you have, and Prabhupada also said on a number of occasions that Dadami Buddhi Yogam Tang means that Krishna will give you the intelligence how to develop these strategies. Maybe some of them won't work, like the Hollywood Boulevard fiasco. But by trying, something wonderful will happen. Because of you. You can do it. You can stand up and speak about Krishna consciousness.
On behalf of...
I have only one other story.
On behalf of all the devotees, we're going to make a couple of announcements, and then if you'd like to remain, Dayananda will continue to share